I would like to welcome to this activity that we have here in research office that has an hour with an expert. It's been our 21st since we have actually launched this activity. Now, may I call on our dynamic research director to deliver us a statement of purpose why we conduct this activity. Yes, Dr.
Hello,
Mael.
Jeffrey. Hello, everybody. It's another Friday afternoon for an afternoon with an expert. So we carefully picked the topic for all of you this afternoon to share and realize on the right things to do, especially for our students here, Jeff, now joining the room. I hope we also have our faculty researchers here or colleagues in the room, because our sharer this afternoon will be talking about building link between conceptual framework and diagram. Okay, and let's find out later the significance of an arrow with a head, a significance also of the straight line connecting two boxes of variables. And I hope we can also realize later on when to use such diagram or schema, because in the real sense, we do not only draw two boxes as your diagram of the study for all types or kinds of research you will do. And our sharer this afternoon, who will be formally introduced later, now it is our privilege, our opportunity to have her this afternoon in this loose sharing and discussion of an afternoon with an expert topics. So the purpose of this activity, no regular activity that's every Friday afternoon from 1:30 to 2:30, is for our USTP community be refreshed on the basic knowledge on how to do research. So this is not only beneficial to our faculty researchers, Jeff, but this is also beneficial especially to our students. So I will not take more of your time this afternoon, because we would like to give the time to our sharer and for the open forum or Q&A. Back to you, Jeff.
All right, so thank you, Dr. Talili. Now, this afternoon, I am personally excited to introduce to you our sharer. She is actually a full professor and for me, a productive researcher also in the field of mathematics education. And she is also the Dean of the College of Science and Technology Education of this university. She holds a doctorate degree in mathematics education, also here in USTP CDO. Without further ado, our speaker for this afternoon is Dr. Laila S. Lomibao. Okay, Dean Laila, the floor is now yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sir Jeff, for that very kind introduction. Dr. Talili, good afternoon, and to all the participants here this afternoon. Welcome to the 21st, what do you call this was first session of the afternoon with the expert. And I'm thankful for the invitation, Dr. Talili.
Thank you also, Ma'am Lai, and you are so clear from my end this time. It seems to me you are using a very high speed, high definition computer. You are very clear, your visuals very clear to me. And I know your sharing this afternoon also is as clear as your visual and audio this afternoon.
Thank you. Okay, may I start, sir?
Sure, go ahead.
Let me share first my slide. So I will going to share on and give some tips on how we can construct this diagram of the study. I will going to start by sharing some or identifying some reasons why we usually have or why we do have diagram of the study, as well as I will going to share some considerations on how to design and how to choose a design for a diagram. or what do you call this one, a visual representations of our conceptual framework. And I will also going to give some example models later. So let me start. Why do we construct a visual representation of our conceptual framework? Actually, the diagram of the study, or sometimes we call it the research paradigm, is actually a part of our conceptual framework. Okay, so we are actually, this diagram will help us, will give us, the researcher as well as our reader, a visualization of the concept behind our study, the conceptual framework rather behind our study. So why? Because we want to map out the actions required in the course of the study. So it gives us some direction, on how the study will be conducted. Also, it illustrates what the researchers expect to find through the research to be conducted or conducted already. Including how the variables that were considered by the researcher might relate to each other. So again, it will not just guide us researcher, as well as our reader will guide what to expect in that particular paper. And of course, since it is a diagram, a visualization, it's the easiest, it's the simplest, and I think it's the most effective way to explain how complex relationships among the variables considered in that particular research paper. So again, it will give us a clear directions of the research. So next question will be how to construct one. Okay. Can anyone just construct it, or can draw the diagram? So can we just use any figure for our conceptual framework? Okay. So designing a diagram is actually because we have a basic design, components for our conceptual diagram. We have boxes, arrows, and lines. The boxes are used for the variable. So it is preferred that each variable has, or each box rather, be assigned for a variable. So create a box for each variable. We can also use arrows to indicate the cause and effect relation. Each arrow should start from the variable that a causal that caused an influence to and points to the variable that is being affected. Lines were also used. We can use lines when we expect correlation between variables. Okay, we use this one if we're not showing cause and effect. So if we're going to show or our studies about cause and effect, then we'll go for an arrow. So these are the summary. Can have box for variable, arrow for a causal influence, line for connections. Okay, so arrow, one directional arrow. So if, as what I've mentioned earlier, it pointed to from one variable to the other variable. So this means that we have variable A affects variable B, and B does not affect A. So we cannot what do you call this one? Use arrow anytime. So we have to consider where should our arrowhead will points to. Okay, so just like an example, yesterday someone was showing his conceptual diagram. The study is just about describing the relationship, but in the diagram, it it shows that it is a cause and effect study. So that's why we have to be careful on choosing which one are we going to use. We can also have a double what do you call this one? Two-directional arrow. No, it will show a two-directional relationship between the variables. So it means that, for example, we have variable A, and then we have variable B. So it means that A affects B as well as B affects A. And again, line without an arrowhead, just shows relationships between two or more variables. Okay, no questions so far? Okay, so since we know now the basic, now the next question will be, what are the things that we may consider in designing the diagram of the study? Okay, so I have three, which I practice and I find it more effective for me. So if you want to adapt, and follow, it's okay also. So we're going to start with the research title. So considering, because again, the diagram is actually a part of the conceptual framework. So the title. So for example, we have this title, Contextualized Problem Solving, its effect on students' conceptual understanding and mathematical anxiety. So right there and there, we can identify the variables being considered in this particular study. So we can right away identify the independent variables as well as dependent variables. It's always my advice to my students when they read research articles to when they're going to review after they identify the gaps and the specific problem, to reduce it and identify, not to reduce, the analyze and to identify the variables, because it's easier to understand the paper if we're able to identify from the start the variables being considered in the study. So with this example, then we have an arrow because we are, the title reference to an effect. Okay, so the contextualized problem solving is considered the one that may cause an effect on the other two variables, students' conceptual understanding and mathematics anxiety. Okay, so we can have the one that may cause an effect, okay, as our IV, the independent variable, and then the DV or dependent variable. Easy lang, no? Okay. Questions? The other considerations that we consider is our research questions, because there are research questions that actually identify variables already or factors. We call this question as factor isolating questions or factor naming question. So these are questions that isolate, categorize, or describe or name factors and situations. So if we have this one, the most commonly used diagram to show the isolations of variables, if we're going to attempt to use or attempt to isolate factors or major variables in the study, according to Cristobal in 2017, IPO would be a more appropriate diagram to used. No, it attempts to isolate factors of major variables of the study. So the IPO shows the flow of the data or end of the materials. So that would be the input, and then IPO, input, process, output. And the process will be all the processing tasks, the activity that you were going to do, no? How are you going to answer your or gather the data or answer your research question? Okay, and the output, of course, is the data or the materials, that flows out from the transformation process. Okay, or data materials flowing out of the transformation process. So this is the result you expect from when you're able to answer your questions. This is the output. The third considerations, of course, when we draft our conceptual framework, we have to read, diba? We do literature review, okay? So one is through literature review. So considering variables 1 and 2, how one is related to the other. So what do the literature say about the variables being considered? Okay, so that's one. And also, aside from that, considering variable 1 and 2 or more, you may also find in the literature or related studies that you reviewed some other variables that may have an influence or a role, or may have a role rather in the other variables. That's why we call it sometimes the diagram as the schematic diagram of the interplay of variables. So will you consider or what are the variables that you are going to consider as, for example, a mediator or a moderator variables? So we can actually find that one and show its relation through the diagram, of course, from our review of our related literatures and studies. So again, since I mentioned mediation variable or mediator variables, so these are variables that explains why and how the relations between the independent variables, for example, and dependent variable. Okay, in other words, mediation, middleman, tawag na middleman in between the two variables. So mediation contextualizes the reasons for the effect. So others, researchers describe it as a variable that may cause or caused by the IV or the independent variable, which eventually may cause also or may have some influence on the dependent variable. So for example, so before nila kasimple, because we read that there are other variables that may considered in your study. So for example, exercise and loss of weight. Okay, dili siya math. Okay, exercise and the loss of weight. And we consider, for example, uh, calorie, calorie loss, calorie intake, or lost here. So we can, no? So you exercise, tapos your mediator will be the calorie lost. Then there will be an effect on the weight lost. Okay? Do not wonder nga nung kana ko yung example kasi gusto yun kung mag-weight lost. Okay, so that's one. Okay, another is the moderator variable. No, changes the effect. Rather, it focuses on the level of strength, no, or direction of the effect of the independent to the dependent variable. This variable, take note, no, it's not no caused or influenced no by the independent variable, unlike the previous one. Okay, so for example, this diagram. So you have here the mediator. So for example, we have number of hours and exam scores. Okay, so number of hours of, for study will it influence or have an effect on the exam score. Okay, that would be an example. That will be our X, our IV, and Y or DV. By the way, I use the X and Y because it's easier, no? Because we're used to it in our Cartesian plane. So if we change our X, then there will be change in Y, or what's that relation. So what happened if you change X? What will happen to your Y? So it's easier to describe the independent variable that way. And then going back to our MO, moderator. So for example, let's have the number of problems being answered, okay, or problem exercise, no, taken or answered. So that may have an effect on the dependent, on our Y, no, but it's not actually, no, dependent on X, because it doesn't matter how many will you're going to able to answer, no, kung pwede man sa taas kay mong oras isara di ay kabuka problem. Okay, so that's an example. Okay, so these are, no, our sample, no, research paradigm that, no, we can pattern to or model. Okay, so again, the usual, if no, we're testing hypothesis and use experimental based studies or experimental design. So we have the IV-DV model. But again, no, after you read literatures, you have also to consider the other variables. Okay, this is one. The IPO, no, again, largely used to isolate factors or major variables that cause problem or a phenomenon rather under investigation. And of course, you can create your own. Okay, can create your own. We have a proposed original model. Again, it's from your readings from the RRL and related studies. Okay, so this is the example. I took this one from Dr. Bakabak's studies. Okay, so an example, your own proposed original model. Okay, as well as this one, an example of an original model. So that's all. So if you have some questions, Sir Jeff, am I too fast?
Okay, thank you, Dean Laila, for that comprehensive talk on conceptual framework and diagram study for giving us tips. So how are we going to construct them? At this point in time, let us continue the discussion. We're having this knowledge sharing part, the activity in here. We shall actually welcome some clarificatory questions and ideas from any of the participants in this virtual. All right, so shall we begin with our research director, Dr. Talili?
Yeah, Jeff, that's not the protocol. No, maybe others can start the ball rolling. Okay.
Yes, they have,
Yeah.
especially our students here. Do you have
Yeah.
any questions, clarification?
Yeah, that's actually a good input, no, Dean Lomibao. Thank you so much for that. I know our students joining the room are benefited of the sharing you did earlier. I just would like to underscore some common mistakes in preparing the diagram or schema of the study, especially on the part of our students, no? In the undergrad, even in the grad level, Ma'am Lai, no? Nagyang pinagkamali, nakasayop.
Ang direction, baliktad.
Yes. You know what? When I taught research for the first time, I cannot recall when was that semester or year, sa TCM. After that, no, a year after, nakatawa ko kay, when I asked my students, guys, I want you, because you have read already the kanang related literature, you already identified a theory which will be the basis of your research or thesis. Now, karon, I want you to prepare a diagram and craft statement of the problem. So, pagpasa sa diagram of the study kay maumantong naay box isa, naaday box isa kato yung gipakita ganina Ma'am Lai, no? So funny because at the same time naluoy ko nila mo to atong gi-explainan nga guys dili man gud tanang panahon nga mag-draw ka og one box on the left for your independent variable, mag-draw po ka another box on the right for your dependent variables. Dili man ana magud tanang panahon ang research. Depende gyud na sa imuhang
uniform sila, sir.
Oo, mo ay nang ikuan kay mao gud na nakita sa library
Yes.
Ma'am Lai. I do not know no sa imong nga field no mathematical education kung mag-consider ba mo og lain nga diagram kay I told them guys dili man gud sa tanang panahon nga inyong study is correlational in nature, meaning nag-measure mo og relationship no causal effect relationship between variables dili magud ana sa tanang panahon. A study could be purely descriptive in nature. Anak ko nila, don't be afraid to draw any representation of your concepts sa inyong diagram, not necessarily one box on the left, another box on the right. Pwede gid mo mag-draw og circles, pwede mo mag-draw og mga square, basta kay ang concepts, variables in yung study, ang direction very clear. Anak ko sa ila. So, nindot kaayo ganina no gi-emphasize ni Ma'am Laila tong mga kanabitang use of katong naabitay arrowhead no kano sa tamo gamit og arrowhead nga isa lang unidirectional o kano sa butang mo gamit og arrowheads nga pabalik no. So that is very important thing masayran sa ato ang mga estudyante. Labi na gyud sa ato mga estudyante. Though naa pa may itong mga kauban mga researchers nga mga teachers usahay tingali nalimot sila nalimot sila sa nasayop. So but this is actually very common.
Yes, sir, common. So just even no in the presentations of research presented na in a summit, nagyud bang gawas those are work of faculty. So na-miss nila, sir, na when they conceptualize siguro the study, gusto sila cause and effect. So they have that conceptual diagram, but their questions or research questions are just asking for a relation. So na yung mga alignment that should be done, no? So our conceptual diagram should be aligned with the research questions. So kana
I
siya
I
ang
like
gatanahon.
yeah, I like the point that
Mm.
you emphasize the utility of a straight line and a line with
Yes.
arrowhead. Importante ka na gyud, no? Wala akong gi-emphasize ako mga estudyante gyud kay importante. Because if the study is not experimental in nature, nganong magamit man siya og arrowhead?
It's maybe because it's the usual na examples,
Oh.
no? Or
Yes.
they're oriented of the experimental designs, and yun pala descriptive lang, no?
Pwede ato
So
tingalin nang i-emphasize sa atong even in the undergrad in the grad ma'am Lino sa atong research methods ng mga klase. Okay.
passing,
That
yes.
actually remains to me no a misnomer up to now. Unya kanira bang research like mathematics, I suppose, kung dili nato ma-deliver clearly to our students, para sa ako mas lisod pa hinuon sa math.
Okay na sila.
No?
Mas dali sila ma-identify sa X and Y.
Yes.
And if there's no, they're just showing the relation, no, not the cause. So that's why I usually use even in the research course the X and Y. It's easier to understand.
Another point I'd like to underscore from Ma'am Laila sharing earlier, nindot to yang gi-emphasize pod nga kani ato mga concepts no variables nga atong reflect sa atong diagram, wala maguni sila kay nitunga sa kalit nga pagtunga sa imong kabubuton. These variables and concepts are based or taken from previous related studies and even from the theory nga imong i-anchor imuhang study. So I think that is one good thing that we need to emphasize, Ma'am Lai, no, nga bisag unsa lay yung mahuna-hunaan sa atong mga estudyante nga ibutang sa statement of the problem, wala gani nagkatugma ilang problem statement o diagram and conceptual framework. So very important to emphasize that to them. So Jeff, I don't want to eat up the time, no, a long time on this. I would like, Jeff, the time be given to our students here. Kaya basig na sila yung mga questions sa atong chat box, Jeff.
All right. So thank you, Dr. Talili.
Or maybe we can call them. We can.
Yes, sir. Yes. So any other questions coming from our students here? Yes, Miss Edna. What is that? Eds?
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible po?
Yes.
Ed.
Yes, Eds.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, good afternoon, Dean. I am Edna Paner from the SED Math. I just want to clarify po, since Sir Talili and you, ma'am, already mentioned about the lines, arrows, and boxes. But my question is, when to use broken lines po in diagram? Because you already emphasizes the arrowheads and other. That's all.
Lai, you're on mute.
Yes, okay, arrowheads. So arrowheads, no, of course we have to establish that kung kuan mo the relations kung line, kung arrowheads, you have to consider that there are some considerations that may not have influence or relations between the variables. So you not establish relations with the lines or the solid lines that you use. But seldom what we use or depending on the literatures that you have that read that you use arrowheads. But as far as we don't use much of the arrowhead. The broken lines.
But there are instances,
Yes, there are. Yes, there are instances. So that we use the
broken lines.
Broken lines.
Yeah. So what's the rationale behind it? When do we use broken line? Because you were paneling many times, okay? So when do we allow students or ourselves to use broken
Mga
line?
non-comparable siya, sir. No.
Can you expound that part, Ma'am Lai, please?
Non-comparable na variables, no, sa broken lines. So it's Bisaya ani. Variables daw not directly established muna sa imong literatures na comparable ang duha variables or groups.
Yeah, ato ning i-settle kay naapo ko nakita nga mga thesis or even dissertation as I panel no sa mga defense. There are times when a broken line is used no downward. The candidate and the advisor insisted that the broken line is used to mean an output of the research. For example, if the research will yield an output, example, it will come up with a coffee table book no, as an output, probably for an extension project or a manual, or it could be a booklet no, for extension project. So from the box, there is a broken line connecting downward to the output of research, which may be a material to be used in an extension project later on. So that is another thought. What do you think about that?
Sir, could be used, but dili siya output, the direct output for the research study. What do you call this one? A byproduct. Okay, not the in the research questions, dili siya yung what do you call this one? The output that you really intend to come up from as a result of the study, but it's an output that goes with the what do you call with the result of the study.
All right. Okay. So, thank you, Ma'am Lai. Jeff, si Dr. Saniel is with us. Apparently, Dr. Saniel, what is your thought on this? Ma'am Dems?
Hello.
Yeah. Just to enlighten
hello, good afternoon.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Lomibao, for a very kind of easy to understand, no? Especially for our students, no. And I have learned also some new things this afternoon. Thank you very much, and to organizers. Literature would indicate that for what you call this, for dashed lines, dashed lines represent hypothesized moderating effects of the role, effects of role blurring expectations. So when there is no definite literature on the causal relationships or the, let's say, on correlational relationships, then especially for exploratory studies, then we can include in the diagram that these are the different variables that you would like to test, although literature would not definitely support that there is such correlation or there is such cause. That's what literature would say, but I'm not an expert, but there is such a thing as using the blurred lines, no, in research. I hope I'm able to contribute something. Thank you, Dr. Mael.
Thank you,
Yes, ma'am. That's what I said earlier. Thank you, Ma'am May, for that additional something that a variable that's something that you may consider, but in the literature it is not that well established yet. The relation, of the with that variable with the other variables. So that's when we usually use the broken line.
Yeah, so it's very clear that there is really a need to review related literature for that matter.
Yes, sir. Because
But
we cannot kanang choose or just identify variables, no, to be included in the study without reviewing the variables. Yun nga yung variable does not just came from nowhere. Tapos let's just put in a diagram. So we have to read how thus it relates, no, based on the literatures to the variables, the other variables being considered in the study.
Yeah, I think the student, Ma'am Lai, no, Miss Edna, brought that up probably because that is what she saw many times in the library or elsewhere. That will lead to confusion if it won't be addressed. Now, at my end, again, I have seen diagrams, schemas using dashed lines or broken lines. And then the author, the advisor, have their own way of interpreting the usage or utility of the broken line. So, I think, wala man tingali problema. Para lang sa ako, walay problema magamit o broken line as long as it is best explained in the conceptual framework. No, the significance of using the broken line. Kaya ang akong point, Ma'am Lai, I am telling my students all the time, don't be afraid, guys, to draw anything. You can even draw, labi na sa qualitative research, Ma'am Dems, no, Dr. Saniel, qualitative researchers are very much liberated to draw diagram. Pwede
Yes.
sila mag-draw.
Yes, Sir Mael. They can even use other shapes. No?
Yes.
Other shapes and curves, no? And curves.
They can even draw a tree diagram. They can even draw. Basta when I taught in Cebu Normal University for one sem, na-amaze ko sa ilang mga studies kay Rich Magyun ng CNU o mga qualitative research labi na sa nursing. Na-amaze ko sa ilahang pagka-bold, no, pagka-confident in preparing a diagram that would reflect the kind of direction that they will have in their study. So again, I have to repeat this. Our students should not be scared. They must be bold enough. They must be confident enough to draw any diagram as long as the diagram clearly explains the direction of their study, with consideration also of the one shared by Ma'am Lai earlier. Katumagong iya kay specific for kana experimental research, kana ay causal effect relationship na or correlational, when to use kanang arrowheads nga na line nga na arrowhead na apoy line nga na duha ka arrowheads. That's very clear. That will help a lot, Ma'am Lai, to our students. But what about for studies or kanaang proposals nga dili siya correlational in nature, dili siya cause-effect relationship ang direction, purely descriptive. So what we do in our field no, sa TCM is we use simple line, kana isa ka line lang, walay arrow to mean descriptive study. But again, we can draw any figure, no, any form or mga kanang mga drawing basta kay ato ang ma-explain sa conceptual framework. So I think no, I hope that makes sense.
Yes, sir. That's what we call ang POM, no, proposed original model.
I like that.
POM.
I like that. I like that.
Proposal. That is your proposed original model.
I like that.
So you draw the path, no, of your own study, no. So anchored, of course, in the theories and literature that we've read. So
I like that POM thing. I like that POM. Proposed original model. Okay. So models play a vital role also in creating your diagram. So sa KM Pananglitan Knowledge Management nga akong gitudlo karon, if I may share, daghan man kay mga knowledge management models, and these are very clearly explained and explicated, defined by model authors. Nindot yun kaayo di ay nga ang ato ang study has underpinning, no, has anchor either on theory or model. That if you follow deductive approach. So maybe we can hear from other students, Jeff.
Yes. Okay, so how
Okay,
about yes?
Jeff,
Naay-
ato ning pahimuslan ang panahon, Jeff, kay busy ra ba ni si Ma'am Lai, no? Gitagaan ta niya panahon karon. Yes, Jeff.
Yes po, Sir Mael. There's actually one question here in the chat box coming from Miss Rona Alabata, Miss Rona Bunayo. So it says here, good afternoon, Ma'am Laila. Ask ko lang po if I use box on variable x, tapos I pointed using arrowhead sa variable y, pero ang variable y is not box na circle na. Pwede na, ma'am. So, murag in short, pangutana na ay wala na yung meaning kung maggamit ng other shape. And once we use box or circle, dapat parihat patanan. Sorry kayo ma'am, murag dito. Siya mismo wala kasabot niyang pangutana.
Okay. So actually, Sir Jeff, concern lang siya if it's allowed that you going to use other shapes, no? Of course you are, no? As what I have said earlier, you can wala di ako you can have your own proposed model, no? So just like in the example, naman to na yung box na aside circles. So it let me show it again. This one. Okay. So you have this is an original proposed model, no? You have okay ra siya. Muna yung did I answer it right?
Tingali,
Thank you, Ma'am.
can you project that again, Ma'am Lai? Kato imong example. Katong ganina nga na ay circle na ay yeah, that one, Ma'am Lai, kay
because this is actually this path, no, kanang sa circle, that is the original framework, no, of the LS of the lesson study. But within that is a process and taking into with that process, taking into considerations the other 4 dimensions considered for a quality mathematics teacher. So pwede siya, no? So you will see also other sample diagrams na nagyan na siya, no? Bangay na mapay color, no? So so na, di ba, sir? Nagtuyok-tuyok.
Okay. Basig
may arrow dito, may arrow balik.
Basin og kanang na-confuse sila na pud ani mga tuyok-tuyok kay ang example ganina kay
direct ra,
unidirectional man to.
So kana kay cycle man siya. That is a process, no? A process. Tapos within the process, these are the variables considered that also affect these variables.
Pwede gani po ang gamiton ani Ma'am Lai instead bitaw na straight, instead nga straight tuyok-tuyok. Pwede sila mo gamit og curve nga nagya po'y arrowhead.
Curve ba siya gamay. So this is a cycle, this is a proposed cycle. So meaning, no, a cycle in a learning process. So you may start from the sense making, showing representations, but it's not just that or you go through the process, so after summarization to sense making, but you can also in any other time, no, kung dili yun kay siya pa what do you call this one, the process is complete, then you can always go back. No, so ana siya.
So Ma'am Lai,
and all of it and each of these contribute to mathematics comprehension also.
Ma'am Lai, kaning diagram, no?
This is a proposed
kani
original model.
Yeah, kaning POM, pasabot ba ani sa researcher nga one concept or step in the process or variable affects one another given the kana ang ang mga arrows nga
explanation ani is that this is a cycle, this is a process, but the process is not just one directional, that you start from sense making to this summarization.
okay.
You can also go
Okay.
backward.
All right.
Oh.
So it's very clear here, wala po siya starting point. Bisan asa
Yes, you can
Ah.
have anywhere.
Alright.
You can start anywhere.
Okay, very clear. Di ba man akong giingon ganina, Ma'am Lai, nga pwede ra gyud ta mag-draw. No, let us be confident and bold. Basta kay ang unsay atong pasabot sa drawing, ma-explain gyud na sa ato ang conceptual framework. Mao man na importante, right?
Yes.
So, thank you for sharing that one, Ma'am Lai, kani imong POM. That will give so much encouragement, no? Courage sa atong mga estudyante to draw on their own as long as the direction of the paper or study is very clear.
It is supported by the literature.
Yes.
Because we cannot just draw anything without the support of the literature.
So the diagram is original, no? The model is original, proposed, but the concepts, the variables, of course, are taken from literature.
Yes, dili siya, of course, dili ba siya ang variables, no? It's not just that we just think of this variable, then we're going to put it there. Of course, we have to read the literature if there is really a relations, no?
Yes.
That can be considered, no, for that particular variables with the other variables.
Right.
We have in that diagram, as what I've said earlier, we use diagram to show the interplay of these variables,
right?
The roles of these variables in the study.
Okay.
Laila, any other questions coming from our students here? Wala na, Ma'am Lai, I have one question here. Ma'am Lai, this is to enlighten also students that are also here in the virtual room. What is really the difference between theoretical framework and conceptual? Can you give something, a distinction as regards to these two items? Ma'am Lai, you are on.
A conceptual framework is a justification for why is a given study should be conducted. It describes the stage of the stages of your study based on the known knowledge, no, usually from the literature review, and then no, it's actually outlines the methodological underpinnings of the research, while the theoretical framework is a logical development and connected sets of concepts or premises that are developed from one or more theories, no? So that the researchers create as a scaffold of the study. It's about a reflection of the work of the researchers, no, engaging to use theories in a given study. Klaro ba to? Or see, theoretical frameworks, these are theories, no, that you actually support for your variables to consider. Okay, so yun yung theories, the scaffold, the theories that behind why you consider those variables and how those variables, for example, may develop, no, or influence the other variable. While the conceptual framework is actually showing, no, the interplay, in somewhat way, the interplay of the variable, as well as the process on how, no, the study could be conducted.
All right, so thank you, Ma'am Lai.
Jeff, can I add to that?
Yes po, Dr. Yes po,
Yeah, to put this thing simply, okay, the difference between conceptual and theoretical framework. This is what I told my students. When we say diagram, we mean the drawing. Okay? That is synonym to schema. Now, when we say schema, that's a diagram. Therefore, it is redundant to say schematic diagram of the study. So you can either say or state diagram of the study or schema of the study. Now, the conceptual framework, in addition to what Ma'am Laila said earlier, is written now in textual form, that conceptual framework, to explain the workings of the concepts. That is why it's called conceptual. No? The concepts, the variables there are in the drawing or schema are explained in the conceptual framework. Okay? And then when we say theoretical framework, still it is textual in nature. That explains the theoretical assumptions that you can call out from the theory as your basis of the study or investigation. So that is why for a deductive approach of research, meaning your study is based on a theory or theories, deductive, that means your variables, your concepts should be taken from either related studies or literature or theory. Okay, that is why we have theoretical framework, a part of the paper that explains the theoretical assumptions, whether the theory explains, the theory predicts, or the theory controls. Dito na ibat-bat, Jeff, sa theoretical framework. Because without research, a theory is just an opinion. Without research, without theory, a research is just a description. That holds true, that explains for a study that adopts deductive approach of research. So, for me mag-uban ang conceptual framework and diagram. For me mag-uban ang theory as your anchor and the theoretical framework. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Talili and Dr. Laila. We shall now present the certificate of recognition Dean Laila for being our chair this afternoon. Grace, you may now share it. Right, so this certificate of recognition is awarded. Dr. Laila S. Lomibao is our sharer this afternoon, who just talked about this particular topic, building link between conceptual framework and a diagram of the study, signed this day, October 7, 2022, by our university president, Dr. Ambrosio Bico II. So congratulations po,
Thank
Dean
you.
Laila.
Thank you, Sir Jeff and Sir Talili and the Research Office for the opportunity.